Happy New Year, boys and girls. Not sure how y'all feel about it, but at least for me, the last couple haven't really been the best, so hoping for a fresh start and a better go of it in 2023. Today, we're returning to the land battle scene of Warhammer 3, where the Vampire Coast and the Beastmen meet in the deserts outside Numas. For a long time, this was very heavily slanted towards the undead. They had a big advantage for a multitude of reasons, but crabs were one of the main problems, and they might very well still be. So while Goreherd do their best Michael Jackson moonwalk, we're going to check out a very cinematic and exciting replay that runs right down to the wire. In the green corner, smelling fishy, rotten, and super duper dead, Captain Barbossa and the Curse of the Black Pearl will bring sorrow to the land with a horde of zombies and a handful of vampire elite. Count Noctilus is leader of this incursion, and as always, he is a solid choice versus Beastmen. On foot and with help from summons, there isn't really that much they can do to kill him quickly, and with 60 melee defense and a halberd, he will outlast and outpunch the vast majority of what they can throw at him, which means he's often best just left ignored. Important for me to note here as well that both bombers and the standard 300 pistol mob and drowned dud summons that he can bring into the field are exceptionally painful for their price because of Beastmen's low armor. I confess I was surprised to see a gunnery wight in this build. I'm not sure I'd call it an important addition here, but perhaps it will surprise us with some nasty 360 no-scopes, and of course, there's some gunnery mob that run out of ammo, he can fix that issue. Crabs and Death Guard I like a lot more. Death Guard in general got some big time buffs with Immortal Empires, and though they're still inherently squishy to units like Cygors, which the Beastmen do have here, they can rip their way through large targets real fast and quickly rotate to provide support for the crustaceans. Lamprey's Revenge are a ridiculously good unit. Crazy stats combined with regen, 120 armor, and point-blank shooting. They are a right nasty piece of work, and they're a serious issue for anything but throwing axes, Taurox, or Gorgon in the late game, which aren't necessarily units that the Cloven ones really want to rely on against all that shooting. So how are the Beastmen going to handle this matchup? Well, for one, I don't think it's as bad as it used to be. Silence and Fury gave them some additional units and tools, of course, and Coast aren't the powerhouse they were back in 2018. We're looking at, if not a minibus, something pretty dang close to one. Doombull with the Butchers of Kalkengard, supported by a Cygor and two Great Weapon Minnows on the flanks. Barb Knuckle Boxing and that Dazed Contact effect makes the Doombull a hard-hitting single-entity duelist, if not a super survivable one. And of course, the Bronze Armored Bulls of the Slaughterhorn Tribe are the best option Beastmen have for beating crabs in melee. 28 bonus for Slorge, all that armor piercing. If you can keep them from being shot or bogged down by zombie halberds, they'll chunk through anything bigger than a Prius. Question is, can you actually do that when you're up against a horde of zombies all with guns? Gonna be kind of hard. A lot of Ungor and Goreherd in support. Bray Shaman of the Lore of Wild, mounted on a Tuskor Chariot, Bray Scream, Traderkin, and Jagged Dagger in his arsenal, and interestingly enough, no Ungor Raiders. I'm not sure if there was fear about mortars coming out here, or if he just wanted to focus on a pure melee rush, didn't want to have to defend his back line against scurvy dogs or something, but yeah. The only range pressure being applied this battle will come from the Cygor and the Waystones it hurdles across the beaten zone. It's a rare case where the artillery advantage will not reside in favor of the Vampire Coast. It will be in favor of the Beastmen. And if you're the Beastmen, taking out those bombers early is not a bad idea. They are the coast's best and cheapest tool for deleting low armor infantry. They will wreck Goreherd in only a volley or two, so there's no real reason to charge into melee yet, right? Game plan is to throw rocks with the Cygor, sit back, maybe bait a couple units here or there, but take out whatever dangerous range units you can, because there's no counter battery fire being returned, nothing to force the Beastmen into an early scrap. Crabs are going to look intimidating, not a whole lot they can do right now until melee is joined in earnest all across the line. So for now, Cygor will continue beating up those poor bombers. Not sure he's going to be able to take them off the field. Getting them into crumbling territory would mean it'd have to be very accurate for quite a while. We're going to see some poking and prodding from the Chaos Warhounds with poison. Now, I don't always love these early cav action type plays. It's true that Warhounds are only like 450, 500 gold, and these ones don't even crumble, so when they rout off, they will return once they gain a safe distance. But the question is, what did they accomplish in this attack? And the answer is, nothing really. When all your opponent has to worry about is just those two hounds, and can focus all their attention on dealing with them, these kinds of attacks usually aren't gonna be worth it. It's not disastrous or anything, but those units are better served being at full HP when you are ready to fully commit your forces, at which point they could potentially tie down gunners or bombers and allow some of the infantry units to close in without being shot, or hell, hammer and ambling crabs that are engaging the minibus. Again, only 450, 500 gold, not the worst thing ever if you lose them, but they can be used in more helpful ways than that. Now, melee has just joined, and we are going to see the power of the zombie gunnery mob bombers. Absolutely brutal. Ungorged just lost all their HP in a single volley. Goreherd will shoot the gap and look to silence them for good. Should be able to cut through them quite quickly in melee. You see a lot of players nowadays go for the Goreherd with dual weapons and forgo the ones with shields, just because you want your Goreherd to cut through units quickly. And the melee defense ones with shields typically aren't going to do that as effectively. So even though they do have the missile block chance, usually you're going to see the other Goreherd variant. People like them better. Nicely positioned with the Goreherd there to get in and on top of the bombers. We'll see if they're able to escape. Zombies are not well known for their fleet-footedness. Depth Guard moving out to the Vampire Coast left flank, deal with some more Goreherd, and here we got a very interesting engagement brewing. This is exactly what you want if you're the Vampire Coast. See, the Lamprey's Revenge are kind of retreating behind their own halberds. Deckhand Mob will help them tremendously in that fight. I don't think Minotaurs will help, and certainly if Noctilus drops some more Drowned Dead or more Gunnery Mob into that fight, it's going to get even uglier for the Great Weapon Minnows over there. On this side, this is the fight the Beastmen want. Yes, the Deckhand Mob are close, but they're not really engaged yet, and so the Prometheans are just going to get their salad tossed, and it's going to get pretty ugly for the Vampire Coast on that side if they don't get any help out there. I think Noctilus should actually probably fold back that way. Maybe drop a Gunnery Mob in support to quickly shoot through that 35 armor. Just saw a Bray Scream come out from the Bray Shaman. More bombers dropping in, and the Butchers of Kalkengard and the Doombull slaughtering their way through the center and into the ooey gooey cream filling in the middle. Death Guard committed too early to this fight, I believe. Locked in CQB with Goreherd. Not an ideal situation for them, and one made even worse because the Cygors turned its attention to the elite vampiric infantry, the Blood Knights of the Sea. Depth Guard should have been waiting in reserve to help out versus all this monstrous infantry, keep those crabs free of Great Weapon Minotaurs. Instead, they're getting smashed by boulders in the front lines, and that is not what you want if you're the Vampire Coast. Reason you bring the Black Spot here, they've got bonus versus large, so not only are they able to shoot armor-piercing volleys towards all the Minotaurs, once they eventually get tied down, they actually make very good account of themselves in melee and can deal a lot of damage back because they have so many models and they're technically unbreakable. So pretty good idea to have them in the center. If they get help from Noctilus, they might be able to do even more. Some nasty friendly fire coming out of the bombers on the Depth Guard, who after only a handful of volleys from the Cygor are dropped pretty low. See if the hunger will be able to get them back into the fight, or an invocation of Nahek. I imagine Noctilus will have some heals for him, but for now, keeping the Winds of Magic flowing in the back lines to support himself in the rear against the Butchers of Kalkengard and the Doombull. You see the Great Weapon Minotaurs have been beaten backwards by salvos from the Gunnery Mob. A lot of free range units in the rear. None of them are particularly dangerous in and of themselves, but you mass out all those handguns and it gets real nasty real fast for the Doombull, who now has to contend with Lamprey's Revenge, firing their blunderbusses from point-blank range, and the Butchers of Kalkengard don't look like they're attacking much either, kind of janking out at the moment. Noctilus is summoning more of his Drowned Dead with Captain Ross Moondial as well. Really nice play from the Bray Shaman. Was held in reserve up until this moment, but now forcing a blob amongst the bombers and the Gunnery Mob, and that is when the Cygor will target all of that. Bray Scream following it up, and a lot of damage towards the Undead. Obviously can't stay there with the Depth Guard with halberds in a hot pursuit, but right now, layers of Enflade Fire just butchering the Butchers of Kalkengard. They may shatter. That would be a huge loss for the Beastmen if they don't have monstrous infantry that can cut through these hordes of zombos. That is a big problem for them. They have not shattered yet, but they are on slivers of HP and probably 6 or 7 models. See if the regen keeps them in the fight or not. It was a nice Traderkin though. Hit a lot of stuff. Doesn't deal a tremendous amount of damage, but will slow, will make it easier for the Beastmen to disengage, and will still deal a decent amount of value towards the Undead. A lot of crumbling on the Vampire side, but at the moment, it looks like the Beastman attack is kind of being stifled, except for a handful of Minotaurs, which simply don't have a lot of HP left, and are not designed for cutting their way through swaths of infantry. These weapons only have 33 melee defense and only 35 armor, so simply Noctilus could just drop a Gunnery Mob summon behind them, and one volley would probably be enough to see them off. But they have linked up with the Goreherd, and there are some Goreherd in the back lines, so perhaps the Beastmen are stabilizing a little bit here. Of course, Cygor is still fine. Still a great tool for deleting a lot of these zombies and getting the dickhands off the field. And the Bray Shaman on a Tuskgore Chariot could run through limitless models of infantry. provided they are not halberds, which, I mean, to be fair, the Vampire Coast have a lot of halberds here, so he's gonna have to run into those at some point, probably. But getting very spread out at the moment. Looks like the Shaman is trying to isolate that Gunnery Wight, who has somewhat pitiful melee stats. Rear charge from the Poison Warhounds, and the Butchers of Kalkengard have returned with 6 models. So, the Beastmen are at least somewhat cautious with them. They might be able to regen back to a relatively healthy state. Just saw Invocation of Nehek on the Depth Guard. That will get them out of their crumbling state and into a much healthier position. Maybe not going to see them get back to half HP this battle, but as Brave Scream hits some more of those Gunnery Mob, we're looking at a very spread out battlefield here. And in fact, the Cygor is inundated with the Zombie Horde, and the Walking Dead have shambled beneath its cloven hooves, and no more will we see the boulders fly across the battlefield, at least until those zombie units are dealt with. Doombull marching his way back, probably trying to free that Cygor if possible. Traderkin on the Gunnery Wight, and not a whole lot else. Not sure that that's worth the Winds of Magic. It's gonna do like 600, 650 damage maybe? Maybe a little bit more, but kind of just tickle it. And the Gunnery Wight, I think, is probably one of the least important units on the field right now. As long as it's not shooting stuff, which you should be able to tie them down with the Gore Herd, you're probably fine to just ignore that thing. But perhaps the Beastmen don't want it tethering the Vampire Coast leadership. It will have that Encourage aura, that little blue aura that all lords and heroes will have. So Cygor has dropped to about 2/3 of its total HP pool. Help from the Ungor Herd and a charge from the Doombull. It looks like 3 full units of zombies will disappear. But here comes Noctilus, and he still has Captain Ross Moondial, and he still has Drowned Dead Summon, so he can continue to ensure the Cygor is not throwing boulders. And it looks like the Cygor is going to rout in melee with the help of a Gunnery Mob Summon, which I mean, that spell has always been top tier. It's actually insane how good it is. But it is truly value city against Beastmen because of all that low armor pretty much across the entire roster. You bring that thing in and it gets a volley off and it's already pretty much paid for itself. So with the Cygor running towards the edge of the map, balance bar starting to creep in favor of the Vampire Coast. Death Guard are going to meet their end here. 69 kills at the moment. Nice. Just hit 70. But the dual weapon Gore Herd just swarming them, and this is the issue that Death Guard face. They typically don't perform that well against lots of high damage infantry, particularly if they're armor piercing, but even if they're kind of like the mid-tier, high attack value kind of stuff, those Gore Herd just kind of ran through them. They will evaporate. Brave Shaman of the Lore of Wild up to 245 kills, almost 1,500 damage value, almost all of it due to those Brave Screams, but a couple decent Traderkins as well. Noctilus is quickly running out of bodies, and the Beastmen have actually pretty much cleared out the rest of the Vampire Coast in their quote-unquote back line. The Gunnery Wight is running, desperately trying to escape, but the Butchers of Kalkengard are hot on its heels, and another Gunnery Mob summon from Noctilus with some point-blank volleys. Brave Scream, nice answer from the Shaman. Cygor might be returning in the distance here. Yes, it did not rout off the map, so we will see the Cygor return, but now Noctilus is where he wants to be. He is okay to fight the Butchers of Kalkengard and the Doombull as long as he has some kind of infantry support. Actually, he doesn't at the moment. Drowned Dead might be at its limit or on cooldown. 60 melee defense is very good, but is it enough to keep him alive against the remnants of the Doombull Minobus and a bunch of Gore Herd? Noctilus is surrounded at the moment, and if Cygor gets one good volley in here, it would actually probably do a lot more damage to the Beastmen, so probably don't want to be throwing into that. Yeah, clearing out the Gunnery Mob is the right call. Noctilus stands alone, and how many times have we seen this before? Last man on the field, can he carry the day? We've seen him do it many times in the past. Beastmen do not have a lot left in their Bray Herd, but this time it might not be enough. Bray Shaman routed off, but Noctilus is dropping quickly, and it's almost wholly due to the Butchers of Kalkengard, which just hit like Mack trucks. Tons of armor piercing, great melee stats, and in the end, it looks like Count Noctilus and the Undead will crumble away, and the Beastmen will take it, but barely. And you don't typically see a Minibus-style build against the Vampire Coast. They are extremely susceptible to units like the Gunnery Mob and those Drowned Dead Summons, which we saw like pay huge dividends for Noctilus throughout the course of this battle. The The Death Guard were a good idea. I do think they were committed too early. I think you have to keep them out of range of that Cygor for as long as possible, so using them in reserve would have been the right call, as tempting as it might be to keep your gunnery mob online by sending Death Guard into melee to block those Gore Herd charges. Minotaurs did pretty well here. I think the engagements were kind of even. On one side, the Minotaur Weapons did great. On the other side, I think the Vampire Coast countered them very, very well. But I think if you're using Noctilus here with the Death Guard and Lamprey's Revenge, it's important to keep that all in one big HQ that you can easily support with AoE, Invocation of, and Hex. And I think if he was able to do that, he would have been able to deal with the Doombull a little bit earlier, push onto that Cygor, and probably secure himself a win. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you all in the next one.